All right, welcome to our first video lecture in this online learning experience. It's important that you take these notes in a notebook paper while I go. You can feel free to pause me and write and catch up if you need to, but make sure we're listening to the explanation and actively taking notes, not just sitting there letting this play while you are coming in last in Warzone or whatever you're doing, okay? All right, here we go. So our topic today is unionization, and the main question is, why did unions form and how did businesses oppose those unions? Okay, what we have here is just a comparison of low wage employee, minimum wage is not $8 an hour, low wage employee today, like probably something that maybe a job you would have if you worked over the summer, right? And then we compare that to the average steel worker in one of Andrew Carnegie's steel factories, right? So the modern day, right, you're going to work an 8-hour day, most likely. Sometimes you might get overtime. Sometimes you might have more or less, right? You usually work 5-day weeks, okay? And in that 8-hour days, most businesses will have like 2 15-minute breaks built in, or like if you work for a farmer, you might get like a coffee break or something like that in the morning, right? And then you usually have like a half-hour lunch. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. It depends, right? Now, you work $8 an hour, 40 hours a week, that's 8-hour days, 5 days a week, you're going to make $320 in 1 week. And if you did that for 52 weeks out of the year, you'd make $16,000. Now, that's above the poverty line for a single person, but that is not hardly enough at all to live, right? You're basically talking about like you got a apartment with some electricity and some water, maybe you spring for the internet, and then you're not saving. When you factor in like car payments, all that kind of stuff, this is not nearly enough to get by, right? You're going to need to make more than $8 an hour. Okay. The steel worker, right? We're talking about the 1800s. We're talking about men who have families. Okay. We're talking full on adults, right? They worked 7 days a week. Okay. 7 days a week for every week of the year. They didn't get days off. They got 1 day off. That's the 4th of July, right? 1 day off, 4th of July. Now, I forgot to mention this in here, but they worked, right? They worked for 12-hour shifts. See if I can add that in real quick. 12-hour shifts. Okay, these 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, every day of the year, no breaks. Don't get a lunch break. Don't get a bathroom break. You're working. And this is the steel industry. You're working next to a hot furnace, lifting heavy metal and making steel. Okay. This is not easy work. Okay. You're not packing the shelves at Fairway. Okay. It's backbreaking work, and you're getting paid $10 a week, which runs up to $520 a year. And if you adjust that for inflation, you're making $14,000 about in modern day money. When you compare that to the kind of workload that a low wage employee today has, and the low wage employee makes more, right? This is why we're unionizing, okay? Because this kind of difficult working life for such low pay, you can't support a family on $14,000 a year. It's well below the poverty line, right? This is going to motivate unionization. And especially when you consider like Carnegie is making millions and millions of dollars, right? So that's part of what's going to be in play here. Okay. Now a union is just all the workers collectively organizing together, right? They are stronger together. They are united. Okay. And they're going to negotiate together. They're going to try to get a contract with lower hours, all that kind of stuff, right? There are still unions today. I am in a union, right? We have a teachers union that goes and negotiates our pay and our hours. Okay, together. All right, now, why unionization, right? Well, this is reason, this is why, right? All these working hours, such low pay, right? So poor conditions, low pay, big time push for unions, okay? Also, the uneven distribution of wealth, like we talked about. Unions or the average everyday worker is making $10 a week. Andrew Carnegie is making, hundreds of thousands of dollars, okay? The poor economic conditions of the late 1800s as well. We've mentioned this before, but the Panic of 1873 sets in. You have a lot of boom and bust. What that basically means is unemployment is not steady, okay? And you have a job for a couple months and then you're off for a couple months and you don't really know what the future is going to hold, right? And most people really, especially when you're in a lower class situation, just having economic security and knowing you're going to have a job for the whole year is huge. And so these poor conditions end up feeding into this animosity. Like, look at JP Morgan, look at Andrew Carnegie, look how rich they are, and look at the life that we have to live. All right, so unstable employment and unstable wages going to cause unionization. So these workers go into work and one week they're making this much money and the next week they're making less. And there's not a real like set in stone. So the economic insecurity is going to motivate unions. And what do desperate people do? Desperate things. Okay, so another important part to understand here is deflation. We're going to slow down just for a second so we can understand this concept. It's not the easiest concept to understand. Deflation is when there's a decrease in the supply of money. More commonly, you probably know of inflation, which is when there's more money. So the reason why a Coca-Cola, like I don't know, 20-ounce bottle of Coke right now costs like what? $1.50. Back in the day, it was like 5 cents, right? And you're like, wow, look at the price jump. Okay, it actually costs the same. It's the same value. Coca-Cola has the same value now as it always has. The reason the price goes up is inflation. Because there's more money circulating in the economy, money has less value, which means you can buy less with it. We call this purchasing power. So the more of something there is, the less valuable it is. The same is true of money. The more money there is, the less valuable money is, which means that you can buy less with it, okay? All right, well, deflation is the opposite of that. There is less money available, which means the value of money goes up, right? And that means you have an increase in purchasing power. So deflation in and of itself is just a decrease in the supply of money and an increase in purchasing power. Now, what that means is you can buy more with the money you have. So if I have $100 and deflation happens, I can now buy more with that $100 than I would have before. So if I have $1 and that buys me a McChicken, and then deflation happens, now I can buy 2 McChickens, right? And inflation happens and I can buy half a McChicken. All right, so there's two charts here for you, right? Just the first one on the left is your typical supply and value graph, right? As supply goes up, your value goes down. So when this is money, if supply goes up, that's inflation. What you can purchase with it goes down. On the inverse, when your supply goes down, your value goes up. So the less of something there is, the more valuable it is. Again, assuming it's something people want. Everybody wants money. So we're not so worried about demand here, okay? So if we look at this chart, this is what it looks like in deflation. The money in circulation is going down. What you can purchase with that money goes up. Now, why is this a bad thing that unions don't want, right? Because, hey, look, now you're getting paid $10 a week and that $10 is worth more. Well, because when business owners realize that it's worth more and there's less money, money becomes more valuable. So what are they going to do? Wage reduction. Now, this isn't necessarily unfair, right? Because the money's more valuable, so they should be paid less for the same amount of work. But workers who are already in these poor economic conditions and these unstable wages, this is going to upset them greatly. One, they think like they deserve more money. Two, they don't know how much money they're going to be making next week. And this is going to lead them to want firm contracts that say, here's how long we're going to work, here's what you're going to pay us, and they can do that better collectively, right? Okay, now, obviously, businesses don't want to pay their workers more. That decreases their profits. Sometimes it's not as easy as businesses are greedy and they want more money, but this time it is. They can afford to pay their workers more. And in a lot of these cases, they can afford to pay their workers more and work less, right? They just don't. And this is what the workers are fighting for, okay? Now, the businesses are going to oppose unions a number of ways. The most common way is to, when there's a strike or when the union forms, they shut their business down and they say, you're not coming into work and we're going to last longer than you can last. So you go ahead and strike. You don't work. We can make it on not making money longer than you can make it on not making money. And a lot of times they're right. Okay. Another way that they're going to do that is with blacklists. So what they're going to do is they're going to go on like these union hunts, which basically is, figuring out who's starting the union. And once they figure out who's trying to start the union, they fire that person and they put them on this list and they send it to anyone else in the industry, anyone they know. And they say, do not hire this person. They'll try to start a union. So now this person, if they're trying to unionize, risks losing not only their job, but the prospect of finding any other job, which is a huge risk for a lot of these poor families, right? So if you're going to unionize, you're taking a really big leap of faith. And then you're hoping that the person you're talking to isn't secretly paid to find out who's unionizing and making money by selling you out, and then you get blacklisted. Okay, another way they do it is say, close shop. If you work here, you can't unionize. They require contracts and oaths, which basically say, you're not going to unionize, and if you are unionizing, we're going to fire you right off the bat, right? Okay, now, the most important way that they do this, right? They have to make unions unpopular nationwide. And this is what we call controlling the narrative. Remember, I've said this so many times in class, the narrative matters. And the narrative that they're going to put out there is that unions are the boogeyman, the radical left boogeyman. Oh no, we do this today a lot too, right? Like what do they call their opponents communist, socialist, fascist, right? It doesn't matter which side you're on, you probably heard one of those words, right? Anyone from the left is going to call anyone on the right a fascist, like boogeyman, oh my God, right? And anyone on the left or on the right is going to call their opponents, socialist, okay? This is just part of controlling the narrative. Very rarely are anyone actually those terms, right? And very rarely was a union actually being run by a communist. It was sometimes, but again, rare. And most of these unions didn't actually want to establish some sort of system of socialism in the United States. They just wanted what we call bread and butter unionism, 8-hour workday, fair pay, like maybe don't treat me so bad, right? Okay, so that's what most unions want. But the union or the business owners are very successful at portraying these unions as Marxist. What does that word mean? It comes from Karl Marx, right? Karl Marx, the father of communism. He wrote the Communist Manifesto, okay? Anyway, in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, he basically said there's two groups of people. There's the proletariat and the bourgeois, right? The owning class and the working class. And who is responsible for all the value that our economy puts out? The workers. And who benefits from the workers? The bourgeois. So he said that eventually the workers will be so exploited that they start this whole revolution, a very violent and bloody revolution that is global. That's important to understand. Like that's Karl Marx's belief that there'll be this global violent revolution. Now, Karl Marx was wrong. There wasn't. These revolutions were mostly pretty locally contained, okay? Anyway, so he believed in this violent revolution, okay? Well, when some of these strikes get violent, what do people do? They say, you see, lawlessness. This is the communist revolution come. These are radical leftists trying to destroy our country, okay? So they're actually pretty effective at making this narrative point and portraying unions as radicals, okay? When most workers are just like red-blooded Americans wanting to make enough money to feed their family, the businesses are making this narrative and it sticks. Okay, it sticks. All right, now, in addition to that, they play on the anti-immigrant sentiment of the day, right? This is the 1800s. We have what we call nativism. We'll get into more of that later. But what you really need to understand is there's a general distrust and animosity towards immigrants for a variety of reasons, okay? Knowing this, if you associate something that most Americans distrust with something else, they'll distrust that thing, right? You just make that association. Unions are full of immigrant radicals who want to bring communism to America. Therefore, unions are bad, right? So unions are un-American radicals, and they're going to play off these two big fears, these boogeymen, the socialist, communist boogeyman, and the immigrant boogeyman. Okay, and we still see this today. We still see unions being marginalized because they are associated with, hurting the economy or otherwise exploiting the union or whatever. And so we have a lot of anti-union sentiment today, right? So a lot of this stuff kind of bleeds into our modern day politics. All right, anyway, this is how businesses oppose unions. The narrative: blacklists, lockouts, hunting the unionizers, and through O's.